Week 2 of the preseason has come and gone, minus the Commanders game tonight, but we are going to check in on your favorite rookie running backs, your favorite rookie wide receivers. We're going to check in on all those ambiguous backfields, who was rested, who got injured, usage of note, tight ends, quarterbacks, everything that you guys will need to know about preseason week 2 will be right here, so make sure you stick around to the end. Now let's get into it. All right, so 10 takeaways from preseason week 2. I got to remind you before we get into it that the most important stuff that comes out of preseason games is usage and, who's running with the first team, who got rested type of related things. So it's not necessarily as important to worry about, who caught a 60-yard touchdown and, who looked good necessarily, but we will talk about that stuff because, of course, football is back and we're excited about those kind of things. So we're going to start with takeaway number 1, which is checking in on the rookie running backs. And I'm going to go in the same order, basically, that I did last week. Nowhere else to start when we're checking on the rookie running backs than starting with the first running back off the draft board back in April, the 8th overall pick, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. He saw his first action in the preseason. He did not play last week in the preseason. And here is why you guys should not be concerned about Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson if you're currently fading Bijan Robinson for those reasons. And I know I talk about Bijan a lot, but I really am. I need to hammer this point home. The Falcons running backs had 455 carries last year, so that's a lot of volume. It was the most of any team in the NFL. If Bijan Robinson gets the type of workload that we saw him put up with the first team offense on Friday, then he is going to crush his ADP. He had 80% of the total rush attempts, and hell, even if he only has 70% of the total rush attempts, of 455 carries last year, that would have equaled 318 carries. So we're talking about a guy that legitimately has 350, 380 touch upside, 11% target share in Friday's game, would have been a top 12 target share at the position as well. He also ran a route on 60% of their snaps, which route participation-wise would have ranked only 4th in the NFL last year behind CMC, Alvin Kamara, and Saquon Barkley. Now, I'm extrapolating from like a 1-game, 2-drive sample size, so keep that in mind, but we're talking about the guy's first NFL game. It would not have shocked me at all if we saw Tyler Algier a little bit more involved. It wouldn't have shocked me at all if Bijan Robinson was like splitting touches or whatever the case is. I'm waiting for something to knock me off of the Bijan hype train. I really am. I really don't want to be over-invested in a guy that is somewhat risky, but everything keeps lining up for me to think that, he's going to get a big workload his rookie year and he's going to absolutely smash, because I think this guy's legitimately already one of the best running backs in the NFL. And while he might not get a Najee Harris workload his rookie season because of Algier and because of Cordero Patterson, he doesn't need one. He's a much better running back than Najee Harris was coming out of Alabama. Wake up and smell the legendary season, because it is definitely coming soon. Will it be Bijan's rookie year? Will it be his second year, his third year? I'm not exactly sure. But this offense scored the 15th most points in the NFL with the corpse of Marcus Mariota, a rookie wide receiver in Drake London, half a season without Kyle Pitts on the roster, basically, and a 5th-round rookie running back as their starting guy. So Bijan Robinson in this Falcons offense looked really, really good to me, and I think they could definitely take a huge step forward this year, and Bijan could be a top 3 fantasy running back, hence why he's my RB1 in drafts. The other first-round running back, Jahmyr Gibbs, was given the night off for the Detroit Lions, as well as all of the key starters. He looks like his role is to be solidified. Him and David Montgomery are probably going to run a committee of some kind, but I am okay with Jahmyr Gibbs in the late 3rd round of drafts. Then we get to RB3 off the board in April, which was Zach Charbonnet, and it appears he has won the RB2 job already, which is good news for him. It looks like Kenneth Walker is probably going to get out to a hot start, as I discussed in yesterday's video, and I expect him to potentially dominate this backfield early on in the season, because Zach Charbonnet is a rookie, and usually we see rookies take a little bit of time to get acclimated. So I really do like Kenneth Walker in drafts right now in like the 4th, 5th round, because I think you can draft him and then potentially flip him after like the first 4 games of the year for pretty much whatever you want at the running back position, because I do think Zach Charbonnet is going to take a couple weeks to get heavily involved into this backfield. So moving on to the New Orleans Saints, we thought that Kendre Miller might have been inactive this week because he dealt with an injury last week. He dealt with like a knee injury, but Kendre Miller played, and he showed that he'll be the clear number 2 back as long as Alvin Kamara is suspended. So for the first couple games, it looks like it's going to be Jamal Williams as the lead guy because he got the rest day, and Kendre Miller working in on early downs. But I do really like Jamal Williams as a late round 0 RB target, because early on in the season, I think he's going to have a lot of value, especially in 0 RB. You're looking for that early production. And also because Kendre Miller was pulled off the field on every 3rd down. So that tells me that Jamal Williams is going to get those until Alvin Kamara comes back. So we may have a 3-down workload early on in the season for Jamal Williams, which makes him a very interesting late-round target in my opinion. Then we get to Chase Brown in the Cincinnati Bengals backfield, another rookie running back. Appears to be working behind Chris Evans as the primary backup to Joe Mixon, but he did work into the workload more this week than he did in week 1 of the preseason, which bodes well for Chase Brown, which when I break down my sleepers video later on this month, I definitely believe that Chase Brown is one of the best sleepers in fantasy this year because I do not believe in Joe Mixon. I think he's washed up, and he also has an increased risk of injury because he's now older with a lot of touches under his belt, and Chase Brown was a top 6 running back for me in my pre-draft grade. So I really do love Chase Brown this year, but not encouraging so far, at least, the usage that we've seen from him. So it'll probably take a number of weeks before we see that. Travis Etienne was rested. Tank Bigsby got the primary workload for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which definitely confirms to me that he will be the primary number 2 running back, and he actually looked quite good in the process. But honestly, though, my big takeaway is that Travis Etienne was rested. So definitely keep that in mind. Travis Etienne looks to be the lead back of this team. And then one other rookie running back I want to talk about, but I'll save that for the injuries takeaway because he definitely got banged up. So takeaway number 2 is the other ambiguous backfield. So not the ones that involve rookies, just other ambiguous backfields that we don't really know what's going to happen yet. The Texans backfield doesn't really look ambiguous at all. Dameon Pierce took every single snap on the first 2 drives with the starters after having the night off last preseason game in week 1. And then Devin Singletary worked in after him for a few drives. So the notable takeaway for me is that Dameon Pierce might just be a bell cow this year. I know it's a bad offense, but he was literally a first and second down grinder last year. I think people already assumed he was a bell cow. He definitely was not. He played only 3% of the snaps on 3rd and 4th down in last season in his rookie year, but he took all 4 of those opportunities in the first 2 drives that we saw from him this past week. So we're going to break down some of the dead zone running backs that we actually like in the next few days in a video, and Dameon Pierce is starting to fit that description. If you can get him in like the mid 6th round, late 6th round, I do think he's actually a decent value there. Next, we get into the Pittsburgh Steelers backfield, and at face value, this looks really good for Najee Harris, right? 71% of the snaps sounds normal, but Jaylen Warren busted off a 60-yard touchdown, and he was done after that first drive. So I don't really care about the touchdown. I like that Jaylen Warren looks good, but the fact that Jaylen Warren played that first drive, split snaps pretty much evenly with Najee Harris, broke off a long touchdown, and then his day was done. He also spelled Najee Harris on 3rd downs when he's been out there, and also in his first and 10 snaps, so the downs that we expect Najee Harris to primarily be on the field as the lead ball carrier, we've seen a lot more of Jaylen Warren on 1st and 10 in this season than we saw from him last season. That's up 10% since last year in the preseason. Najee Harris, again, is a workload-related pick. You guys are drafting him for his workload, and right now he's losing some of that workload. We know he's not that talented of a running back. We know the offense will probably be okay, but it probably won't be great. Do not draft Najee Harris where he's going in your home leagues. I'm sure he's going to go in like the 3rd round. To me, that's just an absolutely wasted pick. So do not draft Najee Harris there. There's so much uncertainty with this backfield. And speaking of uncertainty, we have a lot of it in the Philadelphia Eagles backfield as well. Last week, we saw Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott get the night off. This week, DeAndre Swift got the night off, and Rashad Penny has played in both games. So that tells me that the depth chart goes Swift, Gainwell, Scott, Penny, which is a lot more interesting and a lot different than we would have initially anticipated. With DeAndre Swift resting this week, we saw Kenneth Gainwell get the start. He got safetied on the first drive. Boston Scott got some run, and then Rashad Penny proved again that he's probably the most talented pure runner on this team with a long run. It seems that Swift's role appears to be safe, but to be honest, I'm not drafting him right now. He's like the definition of a dead zone running back in my opinion. I'd rather take the shot on Kenneth Gainwell and Rashad Penny later on in drafts if I'm going to take a shot on this Eagles backfield. So takeaway number 3 is some notable wide receiver usage. So let's look at the wide receiver position. We see the Atlanta Falcons will go back to their situation, and this technically isn't wide receiver usage, but I didn't love what I saw from Kyle Pitts in terms of his route participation in this second preseason game. He was usually like an 80% route participation guy last year and in his rookie year, but it's definitely possible that Jonnu Smith and Mecole Pruitt are on the roster bubble or something, and they wanted to see a little bit more of those guys. That would kind of explain things. I'm not overly concerned about Kyle Pitts' route participation, but it was something that raised my ears up a little bit. And also, Matt Collins appears to be the clear number 2 receiver in terms of overall usage. He's definitely a good best ball dart throw tomorrow, but I wouldn't worry about him in managed leagues. Then we get to the Giants wide receiver room, where it looks like it appears to be settling in a little bit. I'm glad I've been taking dart throws in best ball on Darius Slayton, because it appears that the 3 wide receivers set, at least to start the season, will be Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins on the outside, and then Paris Campbell in the slot. That should be the starting rotation at the beginning of the year, at least until Jalen Hyatt can continue to prove himself, and he obviously had a long touchdown in this game, so he looked pretty good, but he did have a drop as well. And then Wan'Dale Robinson, who's probably the most talented receiver on this team, will get healthy, right? He tore his ACL last year, so he's not healthy at the moment. Realistically, this wide receiver core is just not, it doesn't matter that much outside of best ball drafts, because Darren Waller soaked up pretty much everything that we needed to see. Targets, yards, air yards, routes, you name it. If Darren Waller stays healthy, this guy may be a problem for fantasy, and I definitely could see him smashing his ADP out of the park. Next, we get into the Carolina Panthers wide receiver core. Looks like it's wide open right now. But the big news that I've seen so far in the preseason is that second-round rookie Jonathan Mingo is already a starter. So he's already unseated Terrace Marshall, and it looks like even Adam Thielen, at least on the outside, because he's primarily played in, 2 wide receiver sets and that kind of thing. He dominated the snaps as well, 20 out of 21 snaps. All 3 of these wide receivers, Thielen, Mingo, and Chark, didn't leave the field anytime Bryce Young was on the field, and all 3 of them are viable sleepers. In my opinion, in managed leagues, I would rather take the shot on Jonathan Mingo because of the unknown factor of him being a rookie. I kind of know what Adam Thielen is at this point in his career. I know what DJ Chark is at this point in his career, so I would probably only take those guys in best ball drafts. But if you guys are in managed leagues and you need some upside for your bench, Jonathan Mingo definitely makes a lot of sense. So to close out the wide receiver usage section here, Josh Downs, a guy that you guys know I loved entering the draft, he worked behind Isaiah McKenzie in preseason week 1. And this week, he played ahead of Isaiah McKenzie in preseason week 2. The Colts 3 wide receiver set appears to be Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce on the outside, and then one of Isaiah McKenzie or Josh Downs in the slot. Josh Downs worked ahead of Isaiah McKenzie this week, so that could mean he's going to be the starting day 1 slot receiver for this team. In my opinion, he's a premier sleeper. He absolutely will make an appearance probably in my annual sleeper video. So if you guys have, deeper drafts, 16, 17, 18 round drafts, definitely take a shot on Josh Downs, or just, draft him late and store him onto your bench as well. So those were the major takeaways at wide receiver, but there were some others that I'll get to later. So takeaway number 4 was the guys that rested, because some of the thing that is most important about the preseason is actually not anybody on the field at all. It's the guys that are getting rested. And as I talked about last week, there was definitely some encouraging things for some players about people not playing. So initially, my expectation for this week of preseason was that everyone was going to play. I thought, week 1 was like some teams play their starters, but some teams don't. Week 2, I thought was more so like the old week 3 of the preseason, back when we had 4 preseason games, but not a lot of people played. Some teams rested all their starters, and I don't expect a lot of people to play their starters in week 3 of the preseason, but we'll have to wait and see on that next week. Here were some notable restings that could be really indicative of their roles. DeAndre Swift, as I mentioned, was the only Eagles running back that was rested. So that to me tells me he's first on the depth chart, or at least has the safest role. Jerome Ford was the only Browns running back other than Nick Chubb that was rested. So that tells me he's the clear handcuff. Irv Smith, Bengals tight end, was rested along with the Bengals starting 3 wide receivers, Mixon and Joe Burrow. So that tells me that he is the clear starting tight end there. Travis Etienne was rested, as well as the whole Jags starting offense, Kirk, Ridley, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram, those type of guys. So that tells me that Travis Etienne is still well ahead of Tank Bigsby on the depth chart. Jeff Wilson is the only running back that has rested both games for the Miami Dolphins. Raheem Mostert actually started in week 2, but Jeff Wilson was not out there. It doesn't say he's injured. I mean, it says he was out with the game with an undisclosed issue. So maybe he is injured and that's why he didn't play. But as it stands right now, him and Raheem Mostert are both 2 guys that I love drafting late. Rashad White and Miles Sanders haven't played in the preseason despite being still relatively young players, and Miles Sanders being with a new team, I figured we would get some run with those guys, but the fact that they haven't played tells me that they're very clearly the starters for their team. Jake Ferguson, Cowboys tight end, got the night off, along with the other starters, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, and such. Every Chargers starter, including Josh Palmer, was rested, and Quentin Johnston played. So as of right now, it looks like QJ is wide receiver 4 on the Chargers. Keep that in mind. If you guys are drafting him in like the 7th, 8th round, you probably can't start this guy early early on in the season, you're probably going to have to hold him onto your bench and draft a similarly, lower upside piece later on in the draft to play early in the season. And then Jordan Addison, when we talk about first-round wide receivers between JSN, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, and Zay Flowers, who actually plays tonight, Jordan Addison was the only first-round wide receiver with the night off with the starters. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and KJ Osborne all were rested for that game. So that bodes well for Jordan Addison's ability to be the starting receiver for that team, or a starting receiver for that team. Takeaway number 5, let's go to the tight end corner and talk about some tight end usage. I wouldn't be worried about Pat Freiermuth on week 1 preseason takeaways. I was really concerned that him and Darnell Washington and some of the other guys, Zach Gentry, were in like a tight end committee, but we did see that usage correct itself. Pat Freiermuth ran all 7 of the snaps, and Darnell Washington only came in on 12 personnel, and all of the routes at the tight end position were run by Pat Freiermuth as well. So I wouldn't be really concerned about him. He's a good option in like the 8th, 9th round of your drafts. Dalton Schultz, also still the clear tight end 1 in Houston. I think we thought that was a given, just noticing that their depth chart was pretty barren. But sometimes starting tight ends, even guys that are the clear starters for their team, don't run a ton of routes. And knowing that Dalton Schultz ran 83% of the routes, got some targets, got an end zone target as well, definitely really helps his case. And only 12 tight ends last year ran 75% or more of their team's routes, and Dalton Schultz was actually one of them with the Cowboys. So the fact that now he's going over to Houston and he's still getting on the field, running a lot of routes, is definitely encouraging for him. Then we get into some rookie tight end usage. Michael Mayer made his debut, split some time with Austin Hooper. I think he's a little too deep of a sleeper at this point in time. I'd probably only draft him in best ball in like the 18th round, or keep him on waiver wire speed dial for the beginning of the season. And then Luke Musgrave for the Green Bay Packers, again, dominating the routes, the tight end snaps. Definitely a viable sleeper tight end, a viable late round option with no clear number 2 there in Green Bay behind Christian Watson. It's pretty much anybody's game. It could be Romeo Doubs, could be Jaden Reed, who also saw some good usage and looks like the clear slot receiver for that team. It could be Luke Musgrave. So definitely keep an eye on him. Takeaway number 6 we get into is injuries. And honestly, man, we've gotten lucky so far this year, and I'm almost certainly jinxing it by saying this, but we just haven't had that many injuries in preseason. Aside from, Breece and Javonte, who are entering the season with an injury, I'm not really overly concerned with a lot of pre-existing injuries right now. And speaking of Javonte Williams, he was the guy that I had my eyes on most of anybody in preseason week 2, because he decided to be superhuman and come back and play this preseason. And guess what? He was the starting running back. He ran most of the routes. He ran 8 routes to Samaje Perine's 3, and he looked pretty solid in the process, catching the ball, making some people miss. Considering this was his first game back, 8 months removed or 9 months removed from ACL surgery, I think you can't help but be impressed with Javonte Williams. And right now, in round 6, round 7, he is definitely a steal, and you're going to hear us talk about him in the top values on Sleeper video later tonight. I have him ranked in round 5, and you are getting an egregious discount on Javonte Williams because of the injury. It's baked into his cost, and you're getting this guy in round 7 with the implication that Samaje Perine's going to, kind of work in at the beginning of the season, which will probably happen. But the fact that Javonte Williams could be a league winner down the stretch is not baked into his price right now. Right now, being a 7th round pick and looking and appearing to be healthy, he should be going in round 5, like I said. So the fact that you can get him in round 6, round 7 is great. The only significant player to suffer an injury so far, really in the entire preseason, but especially last week, was Devon Achane. He was carted into the locker room after landing hard on his shoulder. He appears to be working behind Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson anyway, so it doesn't look like he was going to be a factor early on in the season, but he is having an MRI today on his shoulder. But to be honest, in season-long leagues, I'm favoring the cheaper options anyway. The fact that he goes higher than Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson doesn't really make sense to me. In best ball, it makes sense because it's a season-long tournament. But I wouldn't be shocked if people that draft Devon Achane in round 10, round 11 drop him after 2 weeks when Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert are the starting running backs. So keep that in mind with Devon Achane. I probably wouldn't draft him, and I would just kind of wait to see when he's on the waiver wire in your own individual league. So takeaway number 7 is things that we still don't know, because as much as the preseason has been informative for some things, there's definitely some situations that we still don't have ironed out. We still don't know what's going to happen. And one of them is the Kansas City Chiefs backfield. And it's pretty important because this team is, going to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. But because Isaiah Pacheco has not played for the Chiefs because he's been dealing with an injury, we have no idea what this split will look like. We have no idea how this backfield will shake out. And honestly, we probably won't know because it sounds like Isaiah Pacheco won't be back next week either. I don't mind Isaiah Pacheco come round 7, round 8, but the fact that he's already dealing with an injury right now, and he's one of the few guys coming into the season with a pre-existing injury, makes me willing to take shots on Jerick McKinnon, makes me willing to take shots on a last-round Clyde Edwards-Helaire or whatever. So Isaiah Pacheco, a guy that I'm a little bit concerned for. Then we go to another AFC powerhouse backfield with the James Cook hype train. Everybody's getting excited about James Cook, and rightfully so. He's definitely, getting literal workhorse usage in the preseason right now. 86% of the snaps, 75% of the rush attempts, 70% of the routes. But we don't know what this backfield will look like with Damian Harris in it because he's been out with a knee injury. So is James Cook going to run 70% of the routes? That'd be a crazy number if he does. Or is Damian Harris going to work in on early downs and potentially a little bit on third downs as well? We really don't know what to think of James Cook right now. So if he's available in like the 7th, 8th round of your drafts, I'm okay with him there. But if people start going crazy and taking him in like round 4, round 5, just because he plays for Buffalo and he was a 2nd round pick and his last name is Cook, I probably would not draft him quite that high. Takeaway number 8 is sorting out some handcuffs. We pretty much know most of the handcuff situations around the NFL, but it looks like Ty Chandler is the guy that you want behind Alexander Mattison. We saw that in preseason week 1. We saw it again in preseason week 2. Zamir White is still the handcuff you want for Josh Jacobs, but it appears that Josh Jacobs is going to report for week 1. So if you guys were worried about the holdout for Josh Jacobs, I probably wouldn't be. I would draft him with confidence at the beginning of the 3rd round, end of the 2nd round type of area. Chuba Hubbard got every lick of work with Miles Sanders out of the backfield in both preseason games. So I would expect him to be the primary handcuff there. And he's actually one of my favorite late round targets in 0 RB and hero RB builds to line my bench with some upside. Then we get to takeaway number 9, which is checking in on some of the young quarterbacks, because I do think in the preseason, getting reps for these young quarterbacks definitely matters. Brock Purdy looks excellent. He looked really, really good, as did the whole 49ers offense. It looked like it clicked. It looked like they were meant to be, led by Brock Purdy, and I think that's important to know. Trey Lance Hive, it's dying, man. I don't think he's going to start games this year. Honestly, I think if Purdy wasn't healthy, which he clearly is because he's playing in games, then we would probably see Sam Darnold out there, legitimately. I think Trey Lance is on the chopping block. Potentially could get traded before the start of the season. Then we check in on some of the 2022 NFL draft picks. Kenny Pickett continues to make me look stupid for drafting him and saying that he was like the 5th best quarterback or the 4th best quarterback in the class. This offense looks like it could surprise people, and I'm willing to admit that I might have been wrong about Kenny Pickett, knowing that he went to such a stable franchise, such a good coaching staff. It's doing wonders for his development. I think the Pickett and the Steelers are going to be pretty good this year. So Desmond Ridder, another 2022 NFL draft pick, is playing within the structure of Arthur Smith's offense, and he looks pretty good in the process as well, which is exactly how he was going to succeed in the NFL. He wasn't a high-ceiling quarterback, in my opinion. He needed to play for a team that had a good scheme, had a good system, and had good weapons, and I think Desmond Ridder might just be good enough to help lead this Atlanta Falcons offense to a 10-win season and potentially 11-win season, because their schedule is absolute cake across the board. Then we check in on some of the rookies this year. CJ Stroud looked a lot better in this game than he did against the New England Patriots last week. Bryce Young looked pretty solid again. Good encouraging signs for him, especially if you're going to take late round shots on Jonathan Mingo. And then Anthony Richardson, he got the night off, so he was announced as the starter just a couple of days ago as well. So it looks like he's going to be ready to go. Sam Howell doesn't actually play until tonight, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. But he is the other main, 2022 quarterback that I'm concerned with. And then finally, takeaway number 10 is just who looked good. Again, this matters the least of all. These are just my observations. You guys might have watched different games than I watched. I watched all the games back, but the guys that popped out to me were basically Javonte Williams, especially considering he was injured and dealing with an ACL tear, reconstruction, recovery. I thought he looked really good coming back. The Giants offense was really impressive, especially Darren Waller. I could continue jizzing over the Atlanta Falcons offense, but you guys are probably sick of me hearing that. All of them made plays. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan, Mac Hollins, Tyler Algier, Desmond Ridder, they all looked really good. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, like I said, looked like it will be vastly improved. I think people forget how unwatchable they were last year. So if you made it to the end of this video, leave a like, subscribe. If you guys want our draft guide, if you guys have a draft coming up, you want to dominate your friends, you want all of our positional rankings, all of our tiers, our overall rankings, our super flex rankings, our risk ratings, which are new to the draft guide, and I'm going to be doing a video on that tomorrow. That is all available in our draft guide. You can get it for just $10 on Underdog Fantasy. If you go to underdogfantasy.com, which will be linked down below in the pinned comment, you deposit $10, you get our draft guide and our weekly start-sit rankings for free for the entire season. It's the one-stop shop, the complete kit that you guys need to help dominate your draft. So if that interests you, check it out in the pinned comment. If you can't play Underdog, you can get it on our site, Flock Fantasy, as well. All will be linked down below. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.